All right, 3 dead, 11 taken to the hospital. These are the devastating preliminary reports following the tragic crash of UPS Flight 2976 today. The incident occurred shortly after takeoff, and when I say shortly, I mean mere moments after leaving the ground at Muhammad Ali International Airport in Louisville, Kentucky. The initial details are still emerging, and there's much we're waiting to learn about this catastrophic event. We have 4 distinct videos at our disposal that I want to share with you, each capturing different aspects of this tragic incident from various angles and perspectives. But let me first provide some context. UPS, which operates its primary global hub in Louisville, Kentucky, was running Flight 2976 on its scheduled route from Louisville to Honolulu, Hawaii. This is typically a lengthy trans-Pacific journey, stretching just over 8 hours, approximately 8 hours and 20 minutes from takeoff to touchdown under normal circumstances. For a flight of this magnitude, the aircraft was carrying an enormous fuel load. We're looking at roughly 220,000 pounds of jet fuel, which translates to approximately 34,000 gallons. When you observe the video footage of the incident and witness the massive fireball that erupted, you can immediately understand the catastrophic nature of this accident. The sheer volume of fuel aboard created an explosion of staggering proportions, with flames and smoke visible for miles. The intensity of the fireball was unprecedented, and several factors contributed to making this situation even more complex and dangerous than it might have otherwise been. Let me walk you through the sequence of events during the early stages of this ill-fated flight. The aircraft began its journey by taxiing out from its position at the terminal. At this point, the plane was loaded to near maximum gross weight capacity, a standard configuration for such a long-haul flight carrying both cargo and the substantial fuel load necessary for the journey. The aircraft proceeded to taxi onto runway 17, following standard protocols and receiving clearance for takeoff from air traffic control. Everything appeared normal up to this point, following routine procedures that occur countless times daily at airports worldwide. Then came the critical takeoff roll, which includes a crucial phase between 2 vital speed markers, V1 and rotate. V1 speed is what we in aviation refer to as the decision speed. It's essentially the point of no return during takeoff. This is a critical concept to understand. If a major mechanical failure or other serious issue occurs after reaching V1 speed, the pilots cannot safely abort the takeoff and stop the aircraft within the remaining runway length. At this point, they are committed to getting airborne, regardless of the circumstances. Based on the Flight Radar High-24 data we've received, we can confirm that the aircraft was traveling at 184 knots when it reached the runway's end. This speed is significantly higher than the typical rotate speed for an MD-11 aircraft, which strongly suggests that the pilots had indeed passed V1 and were committed to taking off. Speaking of the aircraft itself, this particular MD-11 has quite a history. Manufactured in 1991, it's part of a fleet that has seen its share of controversies and challenges over the years. I can speak to this personally. When I was first hired at my airline back in 1991, the MD-11 was considered the latest and greatest in aviation technology. However, our experience with these aircraft was relatively short-lived. After just a few years of operation, we made the decision to phase them out of our fleet due to persistent maintenance issues and reliability concerns. Subsequently, many of these aircraft found new homes with cargo operators, including FedEx and UPS. So here we have this UPS MD-11 loaded to maximum gross weight with 4,000 gallons of fuel, attempting to depart for Honolulu. As we observe from the video footage, the aircraft manages to get airborne, but only barely, before the tragic events unfold. You can see the nose of the airplane lift off in the dramatic footage. The number 1 engine, located on the left wing, is unmistakably engulfed in flames. And then the aircraft settles back onto the runway, a heart-stopping moment that signals the beginning of this catastrophic sequence. Let me direct your attention to this crucial video footage that captures these events with startling clarity. All right, and I must issue a trigger warning here. What you're about to witness is deeply disturbing and may be difficult to watch. The footage shows the aircraft rolling down the runway, its massive frame moving with increasing speed. I'm going to pause the video right at this critical moment. The left wing, specifically in the vicinity of the left engine, is visibly consumed by flames. The nose of the aircraft has already begun to lift off the runway, indicating a crucial phase of takeoff. The bystander who captured this footage begins recording just after that pivotal moment when the aircraft reached V1 speed, but notably before it achieved rotate speed. This creates what we in aviation call a dangerous no man's land, that precarious gap between these two critical speeds. In my extensive flying experience, I've encountered situations where this gap could span 10 to 9 knots of airspeed difference. This interval feels like an eternity in the cockpit. As pilots, we're conditioned to expect the rotate command almost immediately after hearing V1. When there's a 10 or 15 knot gap before that crucial call, you're essentially hurtling down the runway, consuming precious stopping distance, fully aware that you've passed the point of no return and must become airborne, all while silently praying nothing goes wrong. While pilots undergo rigorous training for emergency scenarios, the situation unfolding here, an engine fire during this critical phase, represents a nightmare scenario that no amount of simulation can fully prepare you for. The video continues to show the aircraft rolling down the runway, its nose wheel lifting from the ground in the rotation attempt. According to ADS-B data, which provides precise tracking information, the aircraft passed the runway's end at approximately 140 knots, while achieving only about 150 feet of altitude, a dangerously low height for an aircraft of this size and weight. It's crucial to understand the spatial perspective here. While the nose of the aircraft, where the cockpit is located, might appear to be at that 150-foot height, the actual wheels and underside of the aircraft are significantly closer to the ground. The difference in height between the nose and the main landing gear can be substantial, especially during rotation. Let me continue with the video analysis from this point. The aircraft momentarily disappears from the frame, then returns to view. A massive fireball erupts as they attempt full rotation, desperately trying to gain altitude. Watch closely now as events unfold rapidly. They achieve a brief moment of flight, the aircraft struggling to climb. The video loses sight of the aircraft again momentarily. When it reappears in frame, there's a devastating explosion just beyond the blast fence at the runway's end. The aircraft barely cleared this barrier by mere inches, a testament to how desperately low they were flying. Following this, we'll examine a photograph showing the impact point on the first building they struck. There's a distinct gouge mark across the building's roof. This impact mark could have been caused by either the landing gear or the left wing, though I'm increasingly convinced it was the left wing. I'll explain my reasoning for this assessment in a moment, but the evidence strongly suggests the wing made initial contact, likely due to the aircraft's compromised aerodynamic state caused by the engine fire. I have additional video footage to share with you that captures the subsequent events. In this footage, you'll witness the creation of an enormous fireball. And remarkably, the aircraft continues its trajectory for what appears to be nearly a mile. I'll present this extensive travel distance in video form at the conclusion of our analysis. A critical question arises. How can we be certain they weren't attempting to reject the takeoff when they reached the runway's end, especially considering their excessive speed? For an aircraft of this specific gross weight, the typical rotation speed typically falls within the range of 135 to 140 knots. This would be the absolute maximum under normal circumstances. For an aircraft of this specific gross weight, the typical rotation speed typically falls within the range of 135 to 140 knots. This would be the absolute maximum under normal circumstances. The aircraft had significantly exceeded these parameters, traveling at a speed bone knots beyond the standard rotation speed. They had already surpassed the critical decision point and had initiated the takeoff sequence. The tragic reality was that they simply couldn't generate sufficient lift to achieve substantial altitude, just barely enough to clear the perimeter fence before the inevitable descent. As the aircraft settles back to Earth, I want to direct your attention to a flight-aware visualization we've compiled. We'll review this flight-aware data sequence briefly, and I'm initiating playback now. The visualization spans the entire duration of the flight, which was tragically brief, and you can clearly observe the aircraft's path traced from left to right across the display. The data shows the aircraft's initial acceleration phase with remarkable detail. You'll notice some slight fluctuations in the tracking. This is typical of ground-based readings, where precision can be somewhat compromised. The critical data point comes at the final moment, where the speed reaches 184 knots. This is the key piece of information we can extract from the ADS-B data transmitted to Flight Radar High 24. The aircraft achieved this extraordinary speed of motel 184 knots before the devastating runway overrun occurred. Let me transition now to another perspective. Footage from a CCTV camera. This closed-circuit television system captured the aircraft's final moments after it returned to ground contact and began its catastrophic sequence. Let's examine this footage carefully. Pay particular attention to the right side of the frame. I'm going to pause the playback at this crucial moment. The aircraft enters the frame, but by this point, it's already ground-bound, and you can observe the beginning of a massive fireball developing in its wake. Let me resume playback from this point. There's the aircraft, and I'm pausing again to highlight a critical detail. The aircraft has assumed a precarious position, balanced on its left side in what we call a knife-edge configuration. From this position, it continues its destructive path through multiple structures, including buildings and parking areas, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. This brings us to a more crucial question. Why did this aircraft travel such an extraordinary distance? In typical crash landing scenarios, several factors usually limit the aircraft's forward progress. The wings would catch on obstacles, the landing gear would create significant friction, and the aircraft would typically dig into the ground, dramatically shortening its travel distance. However, this case was different, and I believe the explanation lies in that knife-edge position the aircraft assumed. By traveling on its left side, the aircraft essentially became like a giant blade. This knife-edge configuration fundamentally changed the dynamics of the crash sequence. Instead of the broad surface area of the wings or the landing gear creating resistance and bringing the aircraft to a relatively quick stop, the reduced contact area allowed the aircraft to maintain its forward momentum for an unusually long distance. This unique aspect of crash sequence helps explain the extensive path of destruction we observed, which was far beyond what we typically see in similar accidents. The physics of the situation, with the aircraft balanced on its side, created conditions that allowed for this prolonged ground travel, contributing to the extensive damage path and the ultimate severity of the accident. You can observe the right wing, with its engine still intact, positioned at an unusual angle in the air. The aircraft, now locked in this knife-edge configuration, continues its devastating forward progression for an extended period. This prolonged movement is a direct result of the tremendous momentum generated by its excessive speed. Remember, it was traveling at an astounding 184 plus miles per hour when it departed the runway. The physics of this situation created a perfect storm of destructive forces. The combination of mass, velocity, and the unusual attitude of the aircraft resulted in this extended path of devastation. I'll conclude this video segment now as we move to analyze the implications. Oh, this footage is incredibly difficult to watch. As someone who has studied numerous aircraft incidents, the raw intensity and tragic nature of this event makes it particularly challenging to view. The human impact is impossible to ignore, making this technical analysis emotionally taxing. Let's step back and examine the broader implications of this incident. What's the fundamental lesson here regarding flight operations? The most critical phase of any flight, and this incident tragically reinforces this principle, is the takeoff phase. This criticality stems from several crucial factors that converge during takeoff. First and foremost, the aircraft is operating at its maximum weight configuration. The fuselage is laden with its heaviest possible load, combining passenger weight, cargo, and most significantly, a full complement of fuel in the tanks. During this phase, you're also dealing with the paradox of minimal speed coupled with maximum configuration complexity. The aircraft is moving at its slowest operational velocity, while simultaneously managing multiple systems and configurations. But perhaps most crucially, you're operating with nearly maximum power output from your engines. This power requirement is a double-edged sword, necessary for achieving lift, but leaving little margin for additional power if needed. This scenario stands in stark contrast to landing conditions where the aircraft operates with significantly different parameters. During landing, the overall weight is substantially reduced due to fuel consumption throughout the flight. The power settings are typically pulled back considerably, operating at a much lower threshold than during takeoff. This configuration provides pilots with a crucial advantage during landing approaches. If complications arise during landing, pilots have substantial power reserves available. They can quickly initiate a go-around procedure, applying that reserve power to extract themselves from potentially dangerous situations. This option simply doesn't exist during takeoff. You're already utilizing nearly all available power. In this specific incident, the sequence of events that unfolded between V1 decision speed and rotation speed proved catastrophic. The engine failure we witnessed was unprecedented in its severity. I've never encountered such a dramatic, uncontained engine fire in my years of aviation experience. I'm about to share some additional footage that provides a striking perspective on this incident. This next image shows what appears to be an engine resting off the runway. While there are claims circulating that this is the #1 engine from this MD-11, I must emphasize that this remains unverified. No official news sources have confirmed this detail, and I want to maintain factual accuracy rather than speculation. However, if these reports about the left engine detaching are accurate, it would provide a logical explanation for the sequence of events we observed. The video clearly shows the engine engulfed in flames as the aircraft attempts to rotate and gain altitude. If the engine had indeed separated at this point, it would explain the catastrophic chain of events that followed. The separation would have caused extensive damage to the left wing structure, leading to the uncontrolled fire we observed. This damage would have resulted in a severe loss of lift capability on that side. The left knife-edge attitude becomes explicable when you consider that the right engine was still producing full power. This asymmetric thrust would have created a powerful turning moment, forcing the aircraft to roll left. The flight crew would have been fighting this tendency with right rudder input, attempting to maintain directional control, but the combination of factors proved insurmountable. In a critical situation like this, where the left engine has completely separated from the aircraft while the right engine continues to generate full power, the aerodynamic implications are extraordinarily severe. The asymmetric thrust creates an overwhelming yawing moment that makes directional control nearly impossible. The tremendous force differential between the two sides of the aircraft generates such a powerful turning tendency that even with maximum rudder input, keeping the nose from swinging dramatically to the left becomes an insurmountable challenge. This explains why we observed the left main landing gear digging into the building during the aircraft's descent. It was a direct result of this uncontrollable left-turning tendency combined with the degrading flight characteristics. As this catastrophic sequence continued to unfold, the aircraft's roll became increasingly severe. The momentum of the heavy aircraft, combined with its knife-edge attitude that we clearly observed in the previous footage, created a devastating trajectory. The physics of the situation meant that once the aircraft began this rolling motion, the enormous kinetic energy had to be dissipated somewhere. Unfortunately, this resulted in the aircraft plowing through multiple structures, with its forward momentum carrying it far beyond the initial impact point. Recent reports from various news agencies, particularly Reuters, have provided crucial information about a secondary impact with a fuel storage facility beyond the runway's end. This detail helps explain the massive fireball and the prolonged duration of the subsequent fire. To put this in perspective, I need to emphasize the scale of the fuel involvement here. The fuel farm contained approximately balmy 4,000 gallons of aviation fuel. This quantity is roughly triple the amount carried by the aircraft involved in the World Trade Center tragedy. Drawing from my personal experience, having been originally scheduled on that first Boston to Los Angeles flight, I can tell you that a typical 767 on that route would carry between 85,000 to 90,000 pounds of fuel, occasionally reaching 100,000 pounds under specific circumstances. The MD-1 involved in this incident was carrying an exponentially larger fuel load, more than 2.5 times the amount typically carried by those 767s. This massive fuel quantity contributed significantly to the devastating aftermath. Aerial footage from news helicopters reveals the true extent of the destruction, showing a horrifyingly long trail of fire stretching from the impact point. The distance covered by this trail of devastation is staggering, appearing to extend nearly a mile from the runway's end. This extensive debris field is a testament to the enormous amount of kinetic energy the aircraft possessed when it departed the runway. The technical analysis of the sequence of events has become clearer as more information emerges. We can now confirm with certainty that the left engine experienced an uncontained fire, which subsequently spread to the left wing structure. This wing damage had catastrophic implications for the aircraft's aerodynamic performance. The fire effectively destroyed most of the lift-generating capability on the left wing, creating an impossible situation for the flight crew. Despite having full power available from both the center and right engines, the combination of the aircraft's extremely high gross weight and the compromised left wing made sustained flight impossible on their intended journey to Hawaii. The aircraft's brief and tragic flight profile tells the story. A momentary liftoff, followed by a loss of aerodynamic stability, resulting in an uncontrollable descent. The initial impact with the building triggered a cascade of events, the aircraft rolling onto its left side in a knife-edge configuration, with its tremendous momentum carrying it forward for an almost unbelievable distance of nearly a mile. The human toll of this tragedy has been devastating, with confirmation from major news outlets that all 3 pilots aboard have perished. Additionally, at least 11 individuals have been transported to local hospitals for treatment, though the full extent of injuries and casualties is still being assessed as emergency response efforts continue. This incident serves as a sobering reminder of the critical importance of engine integrity and the catastrophic consequences that can result from uncontained engine failures, particularly during the most critical phase of flight, takeoff. But tragically, I fear the casualty count may rise significantly as search and rescue operations continue through the night. There are numerous individuals still unaccounted for, and the process of identification remains ongoing. As dawn approaches, we anticipate receiving more comprehensive updates from emergency response teams and local authorities. I assure you that I will promptly relay any new information or developments as they become available. This devastating incident that unfolded this evening in Louisville, Kentucky, has left an indelible mark on the community. I understand how difficult it is for all of to process such a tragedy, and watching these distressing videos can be emotionally overwhelming. However, it's crucial to stay informed about the situation as it develops, and I'll continue monitoring this situation closely, providing you with timely updates as more details emerge. Stay safe, everyone!